welcome. We are so excited to have you here. We're so excited to record this episode of NAMI Maine Talks with our fabulous guest, Karin from OUT Maine. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Karin Heim. My pronouns are she, her. I am the mental health coordinator for OUT Maine, which means that I develop and implement programs to support queer youth all across the state. And I'm an LCPC. Is my-
Wonderful. That's such incredible work, and we're so excited to have you here today. My name is Jill Henderson. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as the Associate Director of Development and Communications here.
I'm Deanna Plaisted. I use she, her pronouns. I work primarily bringing mental health education to youth across the state of Maine as a programs coordinator. So I also have been branching out into providing similar programs for adult to adult mental health support, but really doing anything I can now.
Fabulous. Well, we want to get into all the amazing things Out Maine does in our state and our community. So, first and foremost, let's just talk a little bit about like the background of Out Maine. How did Out Maine first come to be, and how have you seen the organization grow over time?
Yeah, so OUT Maine was first started in 1996, which for those of you like me who are from the 1900s, that will be 30 years ago next year, believe it or not. And it started as a volunteer run drop in center in Rockland to support LGBTQ youth in that area. And this sort of drop in center model was how things were done for many years. But what happened was, I think the board kind of started to realize that this maybe wasn't accessible to all youth. There were maybe some youth who didn't feel safe to ask for a ride or, lived further away from Rockland, couldn't get there to the drop-in center, couldn't get the support they needed. So in 2013, the board of directors decided that they needed to expand the work that the organization was doing. And this was when they hired their first employee. Like I said, up until that point, it had been volunteer run. So in 2013, hired their first employee and started doing outreach to schools to help them establish GSTAs, or gay, straight, trans alliances. And then in 2015, we started offering some trainings for professionals, such as teachers and healthcare providers. And in just 2 years, from 2015 to 2017, the demand increased so much that that we moved to becoming a statewide organization, not just focused on Rockland and the Midcoast. So today, just about 10 years after that, we have 10 full-time staff who live and work all around the state. Although our office is still in Rockland. The overall mission of our organization is to build welcoming and affirming communities for Maine's queer youth. I think we're going to talk about this more maybe later in the podcast, but we have a tiered model, and I can talk about that now or later.
I think we'll get to that shortly with how some of your services are structured, but we definitely relate here at NAMI Maine. We operate out of our home base here in Hollowell, but being a statewide organization, it's definitely you have to know how to take it on the road, and I'm sure your team is no different. Are there particular things that you found encouraging as you spread out from being a localized organization to an organization across the state? How did you feel that impact in those communities as you branched out?
Yeah, I mean, I personally wasn't part of the organization, while that was happening, but I think even in the time I have been here, just there are people all over the state in all kinds of settings, whether that's education, healthcare, families and caregivers, different statewide systems and prevention networks that very much want information, want knowledge and skills that they can use to support the queer youth in their lives, or, you know, queer people of any age in their lives. And it's, you know, even over the past few months with, you know, everything that has been happening, unfortunately, on a national level, you know, we've just seen more and more people coming to us looking for information, looking for resources, wanting to know, you know, what are best practices nowadays, and you know, increasingly, you know, what are the legal rights and protections, you know, for queer folks and those who support them. Yeah, so just people, I think the desire is there in our communities to support queer youth and the like I said, queer people of all ages, really. And I think people are, especially now, are just kind of really unsure about how to do that. So they're looking for some guidance and support, and the demand is just increasing rapidly. And you know, we're starting to see more and more need in rural areas. It's, you know, this is not just centered on, you know, sort of our urban hubs here in Maine, like Portland. You know, it's really in all corners of the state. So that's a good thing for us. It keeps us busy. It helps us reach more people, which is really the goal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's incredibly important work. You brought up a great point. I think it's a great time for us to pivot to, you know, some of the rural landscape and how that affects your services. So if,
Yeah, absolutely. So, as another individual that works a lot across the state of Maine and all different types of communities and towns across Maine, as you all know, at OUT Maine, Maine is one of, or if not the most rural state in the country, population wise at least. But how do you find a good way to put this? Not a good way. We also go into very rural rural towns, and see a difference in the community-based support that is available for students, whether it is our queer students or our non-queer students or our gender expansive students. It all varies in rural and more populated towns. How do you find working with more rural towns and supporting their queer youth? How does that go? How does supporting and working in rural towns, what difference do you kind of see versus more supported towns and more rural towns? If that makes sense.
So I think, you know, the first thing that folks have to realize is that, or especially folks who are from away, is, you know, just how large Maine is and how rural and spread out people are in certain parts of the state. I know that was something I didn't realize when I first moved to Maine 10 years ago now, is that it's huge. And you can drive for hours and hours and hours and you're still in Maine.
yes.
So yeah. So, you know, of course, over time, as the internet and social media have, you know, increasingly connected people from all over the world, and, you know, queer representation in many forms of media has grown, I think more youth and people of all ages are realizing that they're queer, you know, because they kind of have expanded their worldview through these channels. And so I think more people are kind of realizing their own identities, and, you know, might feel safer coming out and having those experiences because of, you know, like I said, the internet, social media, queer representation in the media. You know, of course, traditional rural communities have not always been accepting and supportive of queer people. And although this is changing, There are definitely still places in Maine where queer youth or queer people can feel very isolated and perhaps even unsafe, unfortunately, still in 2025. So like anyone would, these youth are looking to connect with peers who share their identities and experiences in a safe, affirming environment. And so this is what our youth programming with OUT Maine aims to do, is to reach these rural youth who maybe did not have access to these services or types of supports in the past. And then, I think there's that piece to help connect the youth with other youth who maybe aren't just in their little bubble of their little rural town or their small, rural high school, but who maybe live all over the state and have a variety of experiences. And then I think the other piece is that rural youth are also looking, especially now, they're looking for adults who support, protect, and advocate for them. Queer youth, especially in rural places, I think are scared right now, unfortunately, due to everything that's been happening on a national level the past few months. And so now more than ever, they are looking for adults who are going to protect them and stand up for them. And that can certainly be queer elders, who can serve as role models for these youth to, show them that it does get better. If you hang in there and you find your community and you find your people, it certainly is possible to have a very happy and fulfilled life as a queer adult. And then, I think there's, queer elders can sort of fill that role for our queer youth to kind of give them some guidance and some hope for their futures, because things feel really bleak right now. And then adults adults, whether they're queer or allies, have a really important role right now to protect and advocate for youth. I know I am always impressed by the younger generations and how self-aware they are, how self-aware they are and how, they're just unapologetically themselves, and they're not afraid to speak up, to advocate for themselves or others, really in a way that I think I certainly didn't have that insight and skill set as a youth. And so, yeah, I'm always really impressed by how aware and how outspoken young people these days are. But they're still young people, and they're still very vulnerable, and so they need adult allies or other adults in their lives, no matter who they are, to protect them, support them, advocate for them, to make these changes and build these safe, supportive communities everywhere in the state.
That is, yeah, it's so important, and I love the approach that OUT Maine takes, like you talked about, just trying to facilitate so many different ways of interconnecting the community, whether it's between elders and youth or adults creating networks that can be supportive of youth. I mean, especially, with places that don't always have the same access to things like transportation or even, technology infrastructure and those things, having such a multifaceted approach to connecting rural communities is really fabulous. So we'd love to get into OutMain focuses their work on support, empowerment, and education. Um, we'd love to hear a little bit about how those three pillars kind of structure your work in the community and how you use those three anchor points to really deliver those like services and create those community connection. Like, how do those three pillars really guide OutMain's work?
Absolutely. So, of course, the youth is at the center of all the work we do, always first and foremost. So we do have direct youth programs, both virtual and in person. We have weekly youth groups that meet online. We have regional programs, and we do try to get to every corner of the state, at least once in a while. So those are things like our Out in the Park family events that we do all over the state during the summertime. We have game nights at local libraries, GSTA regional meetups, so educators and youth from schools can connect. And then we have statewide programs. We just had our Rainbow Ball weekend youth retreat this past weekend, which was awesome. We have another smaller youth retreat in the fall to build leadership skills. So all kinds of direct youth programs online and in person throughout the state. Okay, so the next tier, so that's the direct youth programs. The next tier is about, or the next piece is family support or caregiver support. Whoever the adults are for a youth at home, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever they live with. We offer a caregiver support group that meets online every month. We offer consultations for caregivers of youth, sort of a one-to-one call, where caregivers can ask questions, get support, in a safe, affirming environment with one of our staff. We have different resources and regional programs that take place. And I think that is something we've also seen an increase in, people looking for those types of programs over the past few months, because of course, family members, caregivers, they're scared for their youth right now with everything that's happening. And so we have a lot of demand, I think, for caregiver supports now as well. And that's a big piece of the work that I do is with families to support their queer youth. And then we also offer types of community supports. We have partnerships with multiple community organizations throughout the state to bring our programs to local communities, whether this is different, let me give you some examples, different theater groups, different organizations like NAMI. We work a lot with like local libraries, etc. And so we want to, host events, like co-host events throughout the state with organizations such as libraries and that kind of thing. And then we also offer professional development and training to these same organizations to increase their tools and their ability to develop more inclusive programs for youth, right? So maybe, we plan a program with someone, but then we might also offer training to a community organization so that in the future, they're able to develop more inclusive programming on their own. Kind of that hub and spoke model of, paying it forward type of thing. And then the other piece is about changing the very systems that our youth navigate. So a big piece of that, of course, is schools. So we work a lot in schools to provide support to students and educators. We help schools start and run their GSTA groups, Gay, Straight, Trans Alliance groups. And we provide, again, training and professional development for educators. We work with school boards and administrators to develop and implement inclusive and protective policies and practices in their communities. We work with mental health and healthcare systems, juvenile justice, prevention networks, Office of Child and Family Services, all other systems throughout the state. We provide all kinds of training and education and consultation to really any adult in any who supports queer youth in any capacity, as well as the youth themselves. So direct youth programming, family and caregiver support, community supports and systems, and then sort of statewide systemic change. And we're also going to be trying to do a lot of work around the sort of policy and legislative piece that's happening right now on a state and national level. That's becoming increasingly important, unfortunately so.
I would love if you could go over, you mentioned the different pillars and all the different types of adults that are looking to support queer youth in the state of Maine. I would love to hear a little bit more about how exactly you all work with mental health professionals in supporting queer youth. Like, what are they asking? Like, what type of support are they looking for? How they're looking to support them? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, that's my bread and butter. So I'm so glad you asked. Because that's a huge piece of my role with OUT Maine. So for mental health professionals, we are so fortunate at OUT Maine that we are currently working to implement a 2-year grant that we were awarded by the Jane's Trust Foundation. And they gave us a substantial amount over 2 years to increase LGBTQ plus inclusive mental health services for youth throughout the state. So a big part of my role is to develop and implement the deliverables of that grant. So that includes things like education, training, and support for mental health providers, for families, and for youth. And so specifically for mental health providers, we are seeing an increase in providers looking for information and support. I think a lot of providers right now are struggling with knowing how to best support the queer youth and queer people that they work with. I feel like a broken record here, but things are a little scary right now. Things are very uncertain right now for our queer community. And so I think providers are feeling that, sort of fear and uncertainty as well. And they're really not sure, how to support queer youth or their queer clients mental health, because as providers, they don't have the answers either, right? None of us are sure what's going to happen or how things are going to turn out. We're working very hard for a positive outcome, but we just don't know. And so I think providers are feeling really unsure about how to reassure their clients right now. I think they're feeling possibly nervous about the ramifications of the legal action that's happening right now and how that might impact them or their clients professionally. Am I going to be able to continue seeing LGBTQ clients? Is it safe for me and for my clients, to be doing this work together? Is it safe for me and my clients if I continue providing gender affirming care? What sort of words or language can I use or should I avoid in my required documentation for payees like insurance? Lots of those types of questions about how do I follow best practice to support these youth and meet their needs while also protecting them from harm, protecting myself, as a provider, protecting myself and my license from any possible ramifications. Yeah. So those are the questions we're having, and what we're doing to address them and support them through this grant is we are working to educate and train the next generation of providers. So for we luckily have several graduate level programs in the state to train the next generation of counselors and social workers. So part of the grant is providing trainings to the graduate students in those programs. We are also now officially a practicum site for the USM grad program in counseling. So we'll have our first practicum student this fall, which is very exciting. Yeah. And I hope that in the future, this fall will kind of be the pilot for that. But hopefully in the future, we can expand that to be an internship site for several grad programs in the state through our wonderful universities here in Maine. So that helps, train the next generation of mental health providers to be competent in supporting their queer clients in their mental health practice. And then we're also working to support the providers who are out there doing the work right now. So we have a monthly consult group for providers that meets virtually on Zoom each and every month. I'm the one who facilitates that. And that is a place where providers can gather and just sort of share resources, discuss these questions, concerns, best practices, et cetera. For supporting the queer clients who are in their care. So that's open to any provider in the state, free of charge. You can visit our website for more info. We also offer, ongoing sort of training and education to providers throughout the state. Sometimes that looks like, going to conferences. That's actually how I met Ambrose. Is I spoke at the NAMI conference back in March. So we're doing conference presentations, which, you kind of never know who's in the audience and who you might reach that way, which is wonderful. And then we're also offering trainings to organizations. Sometimes will book us to provide a training, directly sort of to their staff. I'm actually doing one this afternoon that is for a mental health organization in Maine, wanted to have this training for all their staff. So that's what I'm offering. And that can be virtual, it can be in person. We do travel. I do travel for that. But virtual is also always an option, which is great to reach a lot of people. And I think that makes it, we know there's pros and cons to in-person versus virtual at this point in the game. So yeah, we have, and then we also offer, consultations if, a provider has a particular question or, really has a sort of specific situation. I can offer one-to-one consultations as well to make sure we're following, best practice and ethical guidelines. So yeah, I'm so glad you asked about this, and I could talk about this all day because it's really the main part of, my role with this organization. But I think that's probably a pretty good summary at this point. In the future, I think what we're really hoping, all of this work will lead to is for us to be able to help build and manage a network of culturally competent mental health providers throughout the state. Those are sort of big long-term goals.
So needed.
The worthy goals, and it sounds like you're well on your way. I love the sentiment that it's so important to have those training opportunities for not just providers that are working in the state now, but folks who are coming up through the education system and are going to be entering the space as providers and going to be entering the, different communities in Maine, whether it's, in some of the more rural areas or some of the hubs, and having that information is so wonderful and it's so crucial. Um, we know that OUT Maine not only has resources for it seems like every person of every age, but we wanted to talk about a few of your specific resources that are just so awesome to us. So including your free guides that you have available, as well as your podcast, and we'd love to hear about Dear Chuck.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I know I am completely biased here, but uh, when I started working at OUT Maine, I didn't even realize how much information was on our website until I started working here. So I highly suggest that everyone go to our website, outmaine.org. Follow us on various social media platforms for the most up-to-date news. Subscribe to our newsletters. I know we all don't need another email in our inbox these days, but really, truly, as biased as I am, there's way more information through those channels than I would have guessed before I started working here. So I would say probably our most popular guide that we offer is the Allyship Guide. That's available on our website. We also usually bring a bunch of printed copies. If you see us tabling at any events, come over because we usually have it in print as well. So yeah, our Allyship Guide is probably the most popular resource that we have. It's a little booklet that's designed to be really comprehensive and accessible for anyone to use. And then I should go to our website because I forget what's on there. It's always being updated too. But yeah, we have resources for youth, for parents, for educators, and for professionals. One sec. I just want to look and see if there's anything I missed. Something else that's really popular and is available as a free download on our website is the Know Your Rights cards that we've developed for queer and trans youth. So these you can download for free and print them off yourself. They're little you can fold it up into like a little wallet sized, like business card sized thing. And it's just an easy, it just has, hey, here are your rights in the state of Maine as a queer and or trans person. I think we are working on updating that right now, to kind of go along with everything that's been happening in the legislation. But those have been really popular recently, I would say. We have inclusive guides for educators and administrators to download for K-12 schools. Gender neutral bathroom signage that's free to download and print, so that you can make your workplace or your community space safer and more inclusive facilities. All kinds of things. For some are free, some are, few bucks. I don't think anything's more than a couple bucks. But certainly if finances are a barrier for anyone, oh, sorry, that's my email. Please contact us and we could make something work. Yeah, but at our tabling events, we usually bring all of our print resources, and then there's fun swag, stickers, pens, those types of things. Yeah. Our podcast is Thinking Out Loud, hosted by Ellie, who's our communications professional extraordinaire. And we had an episode back in February that was really powerful. That was an interview with our intern and their parents, sort of about what their journey has been with in their family with their youth. And that was a really good one. There were laughter, there were tears. You can find that on our website and social media as well. And then Dear Chuck is a space on our website where you can anonymously submit questions and get answers. However, this is a great plug for Dear Chuck because I don't think we've had anyone submit a question in a while. So if any listeners out there have a question to ask and want to ask it safely and anonymously, you can do that through Dear Chuck on our website. And maybe me putting this out there to the listeners will get that going again.
Yes, we are sending all the Dear Chuck energy out. We need people to access those resources. And what a lovely way to do it too. Just
Yeah.
taking that very old school right into the newspaper, structure and making it a resource in today's world for youth and being able to reach out to folks who are in Maine is such a value too because you know having queer experiences in some places, especially very rural, and knowing that you're getting a response from someone who understands what life in Maine is like and what the communities are like here and the all the struggles and all the great things that make Maine unique, but then even more so for queer folks and queer youth. So yes, we definitely would love to see you get lots of questions through Dear Chuck. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And even, I'm looking at some of the questions and answers, that were asked, a year or two ago, and they're still relevant, right? What to do if someone is refusing to use the right name and pronouns? What to do when someone comes out to you? What if someone changes their mind about their gender identity? How to ask someone for their pronouns if you're not sure, right? Like those are still all very relevant things today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you can check out the archives on our website and, maybe submit a brand new question of your own for us to answer. I bet we have some out there.
Yes. That's just adding to that huge resource catalog. And it has been so wonderful to talk with you today and to hear about all the amazing services that Out Maine provides to the community and all the ways that you approach queer issues and queer support and queer community. Like it's just been so wonderful to hear. So we just wanted to say thank you again to you,
Yes.
Karin, for joining us. Thank you for sharing all this information with us, and we're, so grateful for everything you do for our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is my first time ever being on a podcast. So hopefully
Woo!
You did fabulous. You did great. You'll have to come back.
Shameless plug, outmaine.org, or follow us on social media for our most up-to-date programs and resources. We're getting really pumped for Pride Month. We're going to be all over the state. So please come say hi, attend our events, share our events, share our resources with your family, your friends, your community. We are here to help. Queer youth, we love you. We're fighting for you. You matter and you belong. So we're not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the perfect note. That's the perfect note to end on. Thank you, Karin.
Yeah. Thank you.